Hey, and welcome back to the CSUSB Advising Podcast. This is Matt Markin from the ASUA Academic Advising Office, and I am thrilled to let you all know that we have a co-host joining the podcast, and that is my good friend and colleague, Olga. Olga, welcome.
Thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate being here, and I'm excited to be a part of this experience.
Now, we were just talking right before we hit record about, oh my gosh, how long have we known each other? We've known each other since working in the admissions office at Cal State San Bernardino, or admissions student recruitment, way back in the day. I know I met you in August of 2004. So we are definitely dating ourselves. But yeah, it's been such a long, fun journey, and
It really
we started admissions, we went our own ways, and then found ourselves in academic advising together. So I know you've been on a previous episode of the podcast as a guest, and now as co-host with me. So can you let listeners know a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, we have known each other for a long time, and it's wonderful to always kind of come back. And so it's funny how things just always work out that way, right? But yeah, I've been on campus since 2000, so I'm a Coyote for life. I'm so happy about that. Cal State has been my second home, and so you know, I'm just really happy to be here. And I hope that I can do a good job for you guys.
Yeah. And I think kind of like our journeys, working in different offices now and advising, I think that hopefully students will know that helps us know a lot of information and resources and individuals to connect with that we can help you as CSUSB students. And speaking of which, it's going to be coming up on finals. And I know that could be a stressful time for students. We were students before. I think we've gone through all the different types of moods you can during finals week. And so Olga and I thought it'll be great to chat about maybe some tips we might have for you as students. So Olga, are you
Absolutely.
ready to have this discussion?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's jump right into it. All the years of experience, we've been collecting a few tips.
Oh, absolutely. And I guess maybe we'll start with, I guess coming up on finals, keeping that motivation, staying motivated, especially when it could feel like all the assignments or exams, the projects, everything's kind of coming to a head and piling up. We can be overwhelmed. Might be burnt out from 15 weeks of a semester. I don't know. What tips do you have?
I think leading up to it, yeah, we start getting overwhelmed. But one of the things that has worked for me is looking at smaller goals, right? Like, okay, so I have to prioritize what I want to focus on first. And if, to me at least, thinking about it in smaller segments that help me not feel overwhelmed. It's one of the things that worked for me.
Yeah. Oh, it's kind of like you know, um, taking like this large goal, break it up into little pieces. So kind of get the small wins when you can.
Oh, absolutely. Always take the
Yeah.
small wins.
Yeah. And that to me, based on what you just said, that kind of makes me think about like, I don't know if you've ever heard of the 50-10 rule. So it's basically you kind of study a subject for 50 minutes and then take a 10-minute break and then go back either to studying that subject again for 50 minutes or move on to another subject.
Right.
And it kind of takes the idea that we can get tired easily. Our eyes, in a sense, our eyes are muscles. They can get tired. So kind of taking that 10-minute mental break from what you're studying, because otherwise you might just be like looking at your notes and it just kind of nothing happens. It's not sinking in.
Right.
Yeah.
That's funny what you mentioned because I've heard that. I hadn't heard of the 50-10.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard of it similarly, but in shorter amounts. So I've heard it in 30 minutes, take a
Gotcha.
5-minute break. And in that 5 minutes, do something that makes you happy. Go
Mm-hmm.
into the garden, go get some fresh air, 5-minute party, dance for 5 minutes. Sometimes just those little distractions can get you energized about getting right back into focus.
But I think it's also making sure that if you take that break, hold yourself to that certain 5 or 10 minute break. Because I know if I were to take a break, I'm like, let me watch 10 minutes of a TV show. Then I'm gonna be like, let me watch the whole episode. Oh, the next episode's after that. Let me watch that.
Right.
I'll go back to studying, and then 8 hours later, nope.
Yeah, no, that does happen. I think one of the things that I think about a lot is how addicted we are to our cell phones, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like keeping it out of sight, because then my brain's like, let me just check on this real quick, right? Or let me take a social media break. And to me, like super distracting. So I'd rather not look at it. Otherwise, I'm thinking about it if it's in the background.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And I think kind of taking your idea of like breaking a larger project up into smaller bits. I can think of like, let's say you have to write an essay for a class or you're doing a research paper. I know for me, I can just get overwhelmed by the sheer amount of different parts I have to do on this paper. But if I break it down and say, well, let's say a research paper, for example, well, let me first spend my time looking up on databases for other articles I'm going to cite. Okay, that's a project in and of itself. And then it might be, well, what's my intro? What's the method section? So kind of taking each part of that paper one at a time and knowing, okay, once I finish that part, then I can kind of cross it off my list or check it off, whatever I want to do. But then I can visually see I'm actually making progress to actually completing this,
Right.
ultimately, this large paper that I'm going to have to submit.
So one of the things you mentioned right now, it perked up my ears, was checking it off the list. That's one of the things that for me as a student was like, I'm a list person. I get overwhelmed if I don't have that. I get to check it off. I get some satisfaction and on to the next.
Mhm.
So, that's another thing that might help students is just kind of having a list and prioritize it the way that works for you.
Oh, yeah. What are your thoughts on like what might be some mistakes that students might make in regards to maybe time management when they're kind of prepping for finals?
I think I kind of was a part of that myself,
Me too.
being a, being a first gen student, that was a little rough. And like really being accountable with myself, right? Because when I said, "Oh yeah, I studied," it's like, okay, keep it real with myself, Olga. I read it once or twice. Now, can I verbalize it back to you? Am I ready?
Mhm.
But I guess it depends on each student, right?
Mhm.
I don't feel like I have the best study tools, and over time I always reflect on these things, and it's like, oh, okay, I should have done this in this order, or and I should have like prioritized differently. Because thinking about students, they're working, they might have one or two jobs, they might have kids and a family, and so it gets overwhelming. But so when it comes to time management, I think a really great thing, I'm old school, so I like to still write in my planner. I like to set aside time specifically for studying, right?
Mm.
I treat it as a class. So if I'm in class, I'm not expecting anybody to be calling me or needing of me, right? And so kind of sharing that information with your support group, whether that's your family, your roommates, whoever that is, and letting them know, hey, I'm going to be studying for the next hour or so, just to kind of have that established and make it part of the routine, right?
Oh, yeah. And yeah, I like the idea of writing it down. Or if you're the tech person, put in like your phone on the calendar or something. But setting those reminders, because I used to be one that I was like, oh, I'll remember all of it. And like, I'll remember this later. And then 5 minutes go by. I'm like, what was I supposed to do again? So yeah, writing it down and kind of holding yourself to that kind of schedule. Because I think what happens sometimes with students, and this has happened to me, still happens with me sometimes. I think we might overestimate how much free time that we might have to devote to studying, but underestimate how much time we might need to complete the studying and the papers and the projects. So maybe also kind of going along with blocking out like your time for studying on the calendar, it might be adding a little bit extra time just in case, because like you were mentioning, many students have families, they got jobs, they got other obligations. So sometimes there might life happens. And so you might plan it and then something happens and that becomes a priority. And now you have to take care of that thing before you can go back to the studying. So maybe kind of having that little bit of extra time before and after for the studying as like a little bit of a buffer.
Right. Yeah. Buffers are always great. You never know. Life happens. Got to be ready for it. And I think it's important to also kind of roll with the flow.
Mm-hmm.
We can only control what we can control, and the rest is going to be.
Yeah. And, you were mentioning about, oh gosh, what was it you were just saying a little while ago? But it was basically, like when you were studying, you were like, okay, you had to kind of tell yourself, okay, yes, just because I've looked at it twice doesn't mean like that I know the information. I got to continuously study it. So it's kind of like that consistency with it. But I think a nice, great way is to kind of really know, do I really understand the information or am I remembering it, is possibly try to teach it to somebody else. Which
Yes.
which could be weird if it's like, let me teach it to my sibling or, my parent or, another student or a friend. And as much as that might feel weird, it's like, can you actually, have the information that's in your head and be able to explain it to someone who maybe not in your class and has no idea what you're talking about? Can you actually help them understand it? And if so, then you probably have a good chance of like, okay, I'm going to do well on this exam because I am remembering this information and I actually understand what this information is, other than just memorizing it.
Matt, that's a great segue. Let's talk about, studying and cramming versus I've been consistently studying over the
Mm.
term.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, and cramming, I think I did a lot when I was a student. Again, whether it was just underestimating how much time I actually had, it's like, or things kind of felt like they piled up. I'm trying to get things done like the night before. And whether I'm taking some energy drinks so I can stay up and then continuously study and then go the next day to do the exam or to submit my paper. Um, I found just with myself that I made a lot of mistakes, or I would actually, if it's an exam and I was studying the night before, I would have that like, oh, I blanked out on the exam. And it's like, well, I remembered it when I was reviewing my notes, but it didn't like it wasn't enough time for my mind to process it to actually like retain the information into like my long-term memory to be able to actually do this exam properly.
Right. No, I was there too. But I think it's important if students understand if I'm just consistent, if every week I'm dedicating a certain amount of time, I can verbalize the information I just read back to you. I'm understanding it. I think they're going to be more successful because at that rate, I'm not cramming. I'm just reviewing everything that I've already been studying over the term, right?
Mhm.
And so it'll just retain better and it won't feel as overwhelming having to try to go all night without sleeping and trying to study for that next morning's exam. But just giving yourself that extra time to not feel rushed, not feel as pressured,
Mhm.
can go a long way.
Yeah, and I would imagine a lot of students probably, if they listen to this, are like, that's true. I should be more consistent. But it's also kind of like it's a habit that you're trying to create, a good habit, and maybe trying to get rid of a bad habit if you're so used to doing the cramming. But I think it's also kind of understanding that, yeah, like the cramming can lead to like high stress, high burnout, lack of sleep.
Getting sick.
Yeah, yeah, getting sick. It's also kind of considered like a passive review versus actually kind of having that consistency and learning to understand the information. And it it maybe helps with like a short-term memory boost, but it doesn't lead to very high retention of the information,
Right.
which is why we kind of have that like, oh, I blanked out on the exam when I actually got it. Um, but yeah, it's kind of building that as a good habit of having that consistency. Someone once told me that, like let's say you take notes in a class, then it might be good to like rewrite those notes the night or yeah, that same day or the next day. And then every other day you're kind of reviewing the notes from that class. And then every time you have another class, you kind of just build upon the amount that you're actually reviewing. So yeah, it kind of increases throughout the weeks, but it leads to easier retention and remembering of what you were learning in previous classes.
Yeah, that I think that definitely helped me. If I can rewrite it multiple times, it just sticks, right? And so do it, guys.
Yeah. How do you talk to students about explaining to them kind of studying is different depending on like what type of class you have?
Yeah, well, that can be super different, right? Like my undergrad was in art, totally different than a math major, right?
Mhm.
A math major is probably going to have to do those problems over and over and over, understand the structure behind the problems. Whereas, if I'm an English major, I'm reading a lot, I'm writing, and it's a different type of studying. Um, Now, I've always been a big believer of the buddy system, right? Um, that was something that was very beneficial to me, and kind of like having the flashcards and kind of reciting it back and forth. All right, tell me this, what the definition of this word, right? Whatever it may be. So there's just a lot of ways students can go about it. I think different minds work differently, and so if it's like a type of, I don't know, some students like to learn independently, right? And so that may be better for them. But yeah, if I'm working on a art paper, right? I'm going to be reviewing a lot of images and studying those individual images as opposed to having to do a formula, right?
Sure.
So the methods are going to change depending on the topic. So yeah, practice those problems.
Yeah. I mean, let's say, yeah, a student could like have a variety of different classes, right? Like each semester. So they might have like that writing class and kind of maybe take a lot of those tips that you mentioned. Maybe they have like a studio art class, and then it's like, and I think can tie into like the time management, making sure you have those extra time, maybe those extra hours to work on your project and have a quality project that you're actually submitting for art. But yeah, like the math classes could be like more skill based and problem focused. So it's like you have to be able to understand the formulas.
Right.
But then, yeah, you might have like the history class that's more content based.
Repetition.
Yeah. And so like you're having to do a lot of reading, maybe writing, connecting ideas. So yeah, it's kind of really just taking each class, what it's about, what I need to learn, taking the time to understand, to have that consistency with the studying, but understand that each class will be different on how you go about it. And it's kind of just, maybe even chatting with your professors if you have questions on maybe how suggestions they might have of how to best go about preparing for finals.
Absolutely. I think students sometimes might not utilize their faculty enough, right?
Mm,
Um, keep in mind, a lot of faculty will provide students that summary that they should be studying off of, and have a really excellent review. And that just helps focus on the most important points.
So I know another topic that's a big one, and maybe something we can talk about, and it'll be very general, but AI and finals, or AI and studying, what are your thoughts?
I've had mixed thoughts, right?
Mhm.
But just because I feel like I didn't know enough about AI, or I was kind of hesitant to want to use it. And lately I've just kind of been learning a little bit more about AI and how I can use it to help me in the long run, not to do my work, but to be a supplement to my
Yeah.
studying, right? Like I've been learning about, here are my notes, create flashcards for me, right? Like that's one quick thing that AI can do so quickly for us, to help us prep and feel successful going into it, right?
Yeah, definitely all great points. I mean, yeah, AI, I like how you mentioned it about it kind of being like this supplement, and yeah, I think it can be great in terms of maybe helping to quiz you that the information, maybe even help you develop a study plan or time management plan based off how you are as a student as an individual. Um, and kind of like the quizzing part, maybe it's like, give me some practice questions and test me.
Yes.
I know I had one student tell me about, and this isn't product placement, not getting paid for this, but the study, which had very nice visuals, and you were mentioning like making flashcards, and like this particular AI platform actually can create like a visual electronic flashcard kind of system. And so it's kind of whatever might work. Of course, not using AI for any cheating. Also potentially looking at the syllabus of your class to see if there's an AI statement and if you're allowed to use any or not. And of course, if you have any questions, chat with your professor as well, just to make sure. But it's also knowing, if you are using AI for anything, it's also knowing double check the work, because potentially, or the answers or responses that you're given, because it could be wrong. So you always want to make sure that you are looking to make sure it is correct, or if it is wrong, why is it wrong? And that could also help with your learning as well as you prepare for finals.
One thing I was really liking about it is the fact that it can help you brainstorm, right? We throw out a suggestion, and it can give you really good feedback. You keep kind of giving it more cues to what it is that you're trying to find, and that can help a lot with that brainstorming piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, another big piece, and I know this is something that you talk to your students about a lot as well, is their well-being throughout the whole semester. So what tips do you have?
Thank you. I always think like it's so important. We're not just advising our student, right? They're not just a student. Every student has all of these other dimensions, different things that they're dealing with in their lives. But I think it's really important that, we cram, we do a lot of cramming or late night studying, right? But it's important that we're getting sufficient amount of sleep and that we're drinking plenty of water, because keeps our brain healthy. It keeps our brain ready to learn and to retain all the information. And so I think it's just a way of thinking about our health, right? Maybe trying to avoid the fast food, because that's not going to benefit us in the long run, right? But just kind of keeping an eye on making sure we're getting good exercise, we're getting, sunshine, and just taking care of ourselves. That's a big part of it too, right?
Yeah. Oh, but fast food is so good, though.
We're saving money in this economy.
Yeah. But no, I love it. Fantastic tips for that. And I think it's for students, even us, human beings in general, just to have that reminder of like, we are human. We need to take breaks. We need to have our energy. And that's also going to help us in the long run as well. But I guess as we come towards the end, what any last pieces of advice that you have for students as they prepare for finals week?
Yeah, absolutely. Visualize success, right? We got to will it and put it out into the universe. But not just that, thinking about finals. This is a temporary type of deal, right? We're going to study, we're going to take the exam, and then we'll have that relief, that sigh of relief at the end. So, just take a day at a time, build that plan that you're going to follow to be successful for your finals. And, whatever works for you, keep doing that. And if you need to maybe rely on a partner to study, find that study buddy.
Well, Olga, and any last comments before we end this episode?
If you guys have questions, reach out to your advisors. We're here to help support you.